What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench Podcast Network and channel. Giving a shout out to the rest of the crew: Shad, Kelvin, Jermaine, KB Film Room, Big Dog, Talk Sports. That's right. For everyone who's tuning in, we thank you for supporting Behind the Bench, subscribing to the channel, helping to make this show the best that it can be. And as I like to say, holla. And I have to talk about this right here, man. Look, the NBA is moving forward. Slowly but surely. It's been a very tenuous process because of the negative influence of the super team era. But nonetheless, ultimately, one man or one player cannot stop no show. Ultimately. Even though it may appear that he's indirectly and indirectly doing so, ultimately this league is going to move forward. I think, unfortunately, when I mean move forward, I mean the next 5 years, the remainder of this decade of the 2020s. And unfortunately, when I put the pieces of the puzzle together, when I look at the whole picture, man, my squad is not going to be a part of that. The LA Lakers. And like I said, man, I give kudos to every organization out there, man, who allowed their young players to develop and build that chemistry amongst each other, man, and learning how to adapt to the NBA and what it takes to win, and learning how to do so. And historically, I did some research about the Lakers ever since this whole situation kicked off July 1st, 2018. And what the media has been trying to convince not just Laker fans, but basketball fans in general about what made this franchise tick and what they're trying to insinuate made this franchise successful, it's the furthest thing from the truth. It's the absolute furthest thing from the truth. Check this out. Here go proof. This franchise is an all-time flux, right? They have been led to incorporate a mindset that is based on setting aside logic, setting aside reason, throwing all caution to the wind, pushing all your chips in the middle of the table. That's pretty much been the philosophy and the MO since all this started 6 years ago. And all they got to show for it is 1 year. That's it. That's it. But it wasn't a process that applied logic or truly building step by step. Fans now have been led to believe that Showtime just started out the box, right out the gate. But if you trace it back to the origins of Showtime, the seeds were planted in 1975 when the Lakers traded for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who had played 5 seasons, I believe, with the Milwaukee Bucks. I believe he played 5 seasons. And then he was traded to the Lakers as a reboot to the franchise, not as mortgaging off anything. This isn't like what the Lakers were led to do to acquire Anthony Davis. No. This was done after 2 luminary figures of the franchise, all-time legends, the late, great Elgin Baylor, the late, great Jerry West, and the late, great Wilt Chamberlain. They all retired by the end of actually, Elgin Baylor retired in 1970 within 9-10 games of the 71-72 season where they went on to win 69 games. Jerry West and Baylor retired, I believe, in 1974. And then Kareem was brought in. Kareem was brought in like a year later as a reboot to the franchise. And you still had Gail Goodrich as part of that team. But shortly after that, he was traded to the New Orleans Jazz. Right? Okay. So from 1975 to 1980, they built their team up. They drafted players to play, build around Kareem, Michael Cooper, Norm Nixon, and the like. Then they brought in a Jamal Wilkes, and then of course they drafted Magic Johnson. That's when that run started in the 80s, where they would go on to win 5 championships. Became a dynasty, the team of that decade. But it was a building process, and it took 5 years before it officially took off. Just like in the 90s. Showtime era ended. It officially ended in 1993 after Magic retired in 1991. And then Worthy retired in 93. And A.C. Green went on to play for the Phoenix Suns. And then Byron Scott went on to play for, I believe, the Indiana Pacers with Reggie Miller. Okay, so the only mainstay really was Vlade Divac. And we started the rebuilding process through the draft. Eddie Jones, Nick Van Exel, George Lynch, Anthony Peeler. Took them about 2 seasons, and then eventually they became a playoff level team. That's what you call the foundation. And then they took that next step, built on what they had, and then of course they brought in Jerry West with his just exceptional eye for talent. He brought in an 18-year-old Kobe Bryant, drafted Derek Fisher, and then signed Shaquille O'Neal as a free agent. But even that process, from the point of becoming a playoff team by 1995, and then building up the Shaq Kobe dynamic, that was a 5-year process before they broke through and started racking them championships off in the early 2000s, where they won 3 straight, back to back to back. And then after Shaq was traded in 2004 to the Miami Heat, the Lakers once again, they started to rebuild slowly. It's a slow process. They drafted Andrew Bynum, youngest player ever drafted in the NBA. Youngest player drafted, I think, only by months younger than LeBron James and Kobe Bryant. Andrew Bynum was the youngest player ever drafted to this league, right out of high school. And then they had drafted Luke Walton during Shaq's last year with the Lakers. Then they drafted Jordan Farmore, drafted Sasha Vujacic. They built up the bench slowly but surely. And then 2 years later, actually 3 seasons later, they brought back Derek Fisher, who had played 2 years for Golden State and then 1 year for Utah, and returned back to the Lakers. And then we brought in Vladimir Romanovich, I believe, from the Seattle Sonics. And 4 years later, they went to the finals and lost to Boston in 6 games. And then after acquiring Paul Gasol that year, going to that next year, the 2008-2009 season, they returned back to the mountaintop and became champions once again. That was a 5-year process. So this notion that the Lakers always threw their chips in the middle of the table to win or took shortcuts is the furthest thing from the truth. This is what I want fans of this franchise to understand. The truth, or they say the proof, is in the pudding. Go back and research. You'll find out that the talking heads who are trying to get people to accept what's going on, it doesn't even symbolize what this franchise was about and what made them so great. And that's why, man, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to say it now. Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka have to be under more pressure than any woman, since she's the owner of the team, or any man, since Pelinka is the GM, de facto president of the team, than any woman or man in professional sports, in all of sports, no matter what the level, high school, college, amateur, pro. They are under more pressure than any man or woman in the world of sports, because they're being asked to do the impossible. After mortgaging the future off, which was already apparent after the 2020 season, they haven't finished in the top half of the Western Conference bracket since 2020, 4 years ago. Now, a lot of people they'll try to attribute that to injuries, but there's been a lot of teams out there who was missing players, number 2, number 3 guys like Nikola Jokic. He was still leading his team to the playoffs outright without having to go through the play-in to get there. And that's the main reason why he, along with his exceptional play as a center, was one of the main reasons why he won back-to-back league MVPs, and he really should have won it last year. Technically, he should have, but I had no problem with Joel Embiid getting it. Embiid has been playing, as far as regular season, he's been playing exceptional. Consecutive scoring titles, I had no issue with that. But Nikola Jokic playing MVP caliber basketball. Even this year, he was missing the second number 2 guy, Jamal Murray, for about 20 to 25 games this year, and they still clinched the number 2 seed in the West. Otherwise, they probably would have won 60 games. Okay, so after mortgaging the future, they're being asked to come up with a formula that's going to produce a championship team while at the same time prepare for the future and rebuild. That's what the franchise attempted to do throughout the course of this current season, and you saw the result of that. Because this is how you know that we're caught up in the mix. This is how you know we're operating in flux. This is how you know that we are trapped in the matrix. They told us after Rob Pelinka signed all these free agents, after they re-signed players who they received in the trade last year midseason, they re-signed Rui Hachimura. They re-signed D'Angelo Russell, essentially the 2027 first-round pick that the Lakers had rights to, was given up to acquire D'Angelo Russell, who they originally drafted back in 2015. They re-signed Austin Reeves, which I had no problem with Austin Reeves, man. Like the natural players of the Lakers, man, I always try to support because their scouting department, man, is top-notch. And they found a gem in Austin Reeves, who's an undrafted player, and he's actually playing above his value. That's what you call great scouting. So they re-signed him. Then they brought in like 6 free agents. Gabe Vincent, Jackson Hayes, Cam Reddish, Taurean Prince, Christian Wood. And then after Spencer Dinwiddie was bought out, I believe that was by Dallas, if I'm not mistaken, the Dallas Mavericks. They signed Dinwiddie. So you're talking about 6 players, along with the players who you re-signed, and I'm probably missing somebody because we just signed so many players. It's really hard to keep up over these past 6 years. The experts said that the Lakers had the best offseason of any team in the NBA leading into training camp. Then you even had some factions of the circuit saying that they had the deepest roster in the history of the franchise. That's when you knew we was in trouble. You cannot make a blanket statement like that, considering how successful this franchise has been, considering how many championships this franchise has won. You can't do that. Can't do that. I'm sorry. It can't be done. But they try to do it. And 10 months later, you're right back at square one. They need a third star. The roster is not equipped to win a championship. It's not adequate enough. But they told us 11 months ago that was the case. And it gets back to the root of the problem. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse. You can literally see it. By not seeing it, you can see it. They miss what they mortgaged off. And they did it in one large swoop. That's what they're missing. They're missing the natural building process to winning. When you're starting over, it begins with talent who you draft. The next step is allowing that talent to grow and develop, like what Boston Celtics are doing. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum have been teammates for 7 years. Then they drafted a Marcus Smart, who got them, they got them right on the brink of winning. But for the past 5 years, they've been trying to knock at the door. Eastern Conference Finals, they made a finals appearance 2 years ago. They made key moves this offseason, but they kept drafting players too. It ain't like you signing all free agents or making all trades. No. Boston they balanced it out. They built up their cornerstones, continued to draft, and then made key moves to complement those cornerstone players. And now they're on the brink of winning it all. The Lakers are missing the natural progression to winning championships. So when you hear all these people say, well, Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka don't know what they're doing, it's the situation that's making them appear that they're not capable of running this team. It's the situation. It's not them like in themselves. It's the situation. So they're being asked. They've already been led to mortgage the future away. That's done. And to continue this ride, they're being asked to essentially, it goes beyond mortgaging of the decade. They're being asked to give up the franchise. Because if you're asking them after all the trades they made, after all the roster overhaul 6 years straight, after mortgaging off and relinquishing and casting out the deepest young core in the history of this league and under the one and done era collectively, well, what do you think is going to happen? What do people think the situation is going to eventually turn into? Chaos. This is what happens when logic and a long-term common sense approach gets supplanted with going all in. Digging deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. That's where the Lakers are at. And they got pressure from all factions. Fans of the organization. Like I said, man, I get it. Everybody wants to see their team win. But when you're in a situation where you're not even close to winning, after mortgaging everything off, and you're still dealing with pressure to win, then it becomes a no-win situation. And that's what's going on right now. Then you got fans of that dude. They just want to see him win no matter what, even at the expense of this franchise when all this is over. Then you got the third faction, the talking heads on these sports programs that's mocking them around the clock. So when they say that this dude on the team is making us relevant again, well, talk for the sake of talk is just that, is talk. They're not being praised. They're being criticized and mocked. That's not being relevant. Relevancy is you can exist on your own without validation from media-related voices and platforms. That's when you know you're relevant. And before all this started, the 2 years prior, when Luke Walton was our coach, and all this talk about the Lakers, having this reputation of throwing coaches under the bus and firing them on sight, it's not true. Not true at all. Luke Walton was signed for 5 years, which would have ran from 2016 to 2021. But when that dude was brought to the team, you knew he was done. He lasted 3 years. As a matter of fact, they came to a mutual agreement for him to step down. Because for all practical purposes, he never should have been let go. You see? Because the team was constantly improving under his leadership before all this started. So if they improved by 20 games over 2 years, what would make us believe that they would continue improving under him as the young core would have continued to mature and develop and build their chemistry amongst each other? So for all practical purposes, the owner and the GM is being asked to make chicken salad out of chicken you know what. And that's what it comes down to. And they're probably pulling their hair out because there is no willingness to step back and say, the gig is up. I believe that they're nervous because they don't want to be realistic to the supporters of the true nature of the situation regarding the franchise as we speak. Because they mortgaged the decade off. And as long as this dude is on the team, eventually, if they go down this road one more time, they're going to be led to give up the entire franchise to where we won't have anything to root for the next 10 years. That's what we're looking at. Think about how dire the situation is where they cannot sign an established head coach on any level, college or pro. That should show us where we at. So I've been saying, somebody got to step in and say no more. Somebody needs to intervene and say no more. Or eventually, we will be no more. Those are the options. That's the reality. You cannot win now after the future was mortgaged away and rebuild at the same time. The franchise has been stretched thin, and that's what's going on. So I just want to break that down. Another gold nugget. Until next time, this is JB for BTB Behind the Bench.